In today's episode of the Pathway Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Jack Moxley, who's been actually a marketing veteran, I should say. He's been in marketing for a long period of time, 25 plus years. And basically, we've been, seeing him in companies like Mobility, Blue Triangle, but more notably, we've been looking at his book quite a bit, The Audience of One. And today we want to really deep dive into the book a little bit, but also, how he took the concepts of the book, brought them into action to actually, drive leads and revenue in very interesting ways. So Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So, before we even jump into details, maybe let the listeners know a little bit of your background, right? You've been with Mobility for a while, you've been, with Blue Triangle. Maybe tell us just, high-level bird's eye view perspective on your path in marketing.
Sure. Actually, about 30 years experience. So I spent the first 10 years of my career on the agency side, working on a lot of big consumer brands, and then moved over to B2B SaaS company back even before we called it B2B SaaS, about 20 years ago. And I've done a bunch of SaaS companies since. So For Info, and then Mobility was my last company. And then I just joined Blue Triangle actually just a couple of months ago. So that's my newest one, where I'm heading marketing.
Very, very cool. Just high level, you've been in the space for long. We're Pathway is a marketing tool. We have a lot of marketers listening. Bird's eye perspective. How do you think about the B2B marketing, B2B SaaS marketing space? Like, did it change? Do things under the hood actually stay the same? Like, what do you see? Like, is there a lot of change happening? What do you think are the most important streams that are currently happening versus, going into the future?
Sure. And, marketing is always changing, and the world's always changing, and the prospects are always changing. That being said, there's a lot of basic tenets. And so even if you think about what I think about, I was doing 20 years ago in my career, I still use a lot of those components. What I do find interesting about B2B SaaS, and if you're hiring like a demand gen manager or somebody, what I've discovered is you tend to get some of these younger people who just have a very strong digital background, and they don't understand how offline plays into online. And the reality is, the way we buy today is still the way we bought 30 years ago. We still, buy emotionally, we justify with logic. So some of the same things that you're going to do in marketing, you would do, but it's interesting with a lot of today's young marketers, they really only think digital, and they don't realize that there's a lot of ways that offline can complement digital. And so that's probably where having been around for a few years, I kind of bring that perspective even to the B2B SaaS companies. So we've done things like high impact 3-dimensional direct mail, or combine physical products with webinars and things that again, I was doing 20 and 30 years ago. It's not like new ideas. It still works today. The audience is obviously a little different.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So maybe that ties me a little bit into the book, The Audience of One. Maybe give people sort of a quick overview, the ones who haven't read it yet, or maybe the ones who have it on their reading list. Maybe give them a quick overview about sort of the core concept and, how you got to actually, even write the book.
Sure. So Audience of One, it was published by McGraw-Hill in October. And I actually have a co-author on a gentleman by the name of Jamie Turner. Jamie and I have known each other for 30 years, both marketing veterans. And it was based on sort of the premise that the way companies, and especially on the consumer side, are marketing is broken. The concepts of, mass marketing that worked 30, 40 years ago don't necessarily work today, because there's a lot of things that have changed in the way people consume content and the way they make buying decisions, and the control of where the consumers, control things like price and shopping and reviews and things like that. So there's the changes in the world that are saying, hey, that doesn't work anymore. Plus the digital changes in the way consumers are now addressable, because we consume a lot of our content on our smartphones, on our tablets, on our connected televisions. I can now, and even in B2B, which is still shocking, I can now run a TV spot and target just the audience I want. I don't have to, do the same things that we did back in the mass marketing days, where you're buying, based on certain programs, and you're looking at GRPs and TRPs and things like that. I can say, I need to reach this audience of 100,000 people, and we'll reach them through the various means that we've got that are addressable. So that's that idea of that one-to-one marketing. And so not only can I reach them individually, but now I can customize the content. I can do personalization. which again, we're seeing in B2B marketing, tons of ways that you can now personalize, even in your own product, right? Where you know they're coming to the site based on the content they're consuming, you serve up different content. Perfect use case for one-to-one marketing versus the traditional mass marketing.
Yep, no, that makes a lot of sense. What was the trigger point for you to actually, sit down and bring that into a book? Was there certain like practical experiences? Was that, sort of an aha moment? Like what brought you to that?
Yeah, so I was with a company that was in the leading edge of digital identity and especially early days of mobile, and we had unique patented technology. So I ended up, and I was speaking a lot in the industry and writing for a lot of the industry publications. So I just gained this knowledge and understanding of how consumers are addressable. And Jamie and I had worked together for many years, and we were just chatting one day, and he's actually written, this was his fourth book. It was my first. And he's like, we should write a book on this. I'm like, okay, great. And it took about 2 years, and it started out, we were actually going to just self-publish. In fact, I thought at the time, maybe the company I was with would publish. But as we started writing and as the world started changing, we ended up getting interviewed by the Wall Street Journal about privacy and data, because that's all kind of an area that's changing when you think one-to-one marketing. And so we thought, let's send it off to a couple of publishers. So we literally submitted it to like 5 publishers. We got 3 interested. We got 2 that gave offers, and we chose McGraw-Hill. So it just kind of came to be, and it's been a fun experience. Again, my first book, and hopefully only the first. Hopefully there'll be more, but it's been fun.
Very cool. Now, you alluded to the fact, obviously, that a lot of marketers miss out on the combination of offline and online, right? And it seems to be something that you've had, great success with. Maybe tell us first, like, what are today's marketers overlooking when it comes to this combination of online and offline marketing? What do you think they're missing?
Sure. So, so much of, especially B2B SaaS marketing that we do today, it's so digitally driven, right? Mm-hmm. And even, a lot of CEOs approach it from, hey, if I put $100 in, I want to know I'm getting $150 back. I want to be able to tie every lead to an outcome. And much of what we do today, you can do that, but it overlooks how people buy. And so one of the things that I've done in my last 3 or 4 jobs, and again, I think it's because I came out of more traditional marketing, was I paired that digital stuff with things like print advertising. For example, your insurance agent could put $40 a day and run Google ads, right? Anybody can run a Google ad. When at 4Info, we were marketing to ad agencies and big brands, we were doing full page ads in Ad Age and Adweek. Everybody, especially if you're talking to marketers, they know that's 20 grand. That's not something that your insurance agent is going to be able to do. And so it's part of establishing that brand awareness. So there's a bunch of stuff that we did both in that print world, but one of the areas that I've seen just crazy success, and nobody does it today because they all think digital, is in direct mail. And especially if you're marketing a digital product, if you're marketing a B2B SaaS platform, the last thing you think is direct mail. And I'm not talking postcards, and I'm not talking, FSIs. I'm talking high impact, 3-dimensional direct mail. This piece that you can see over my shoulder, I'm sorry, I forgot on its podcast, so you might not be seeing, but that box that then the headline is ready for the next big thing. It's a 10-pound box. What's inside is actually a giant coffee cup. And so there was a whole strategy behind it. We were going after ad agencies, for example, and we were going after mid-tier agencies, not the largest ones. They were competing with the large guys, and we were offering them a competitive advantage by being able to do attribution on their campaigns in a way that hadn't been able to be done before. So we came up with this idea of this giant, it's literally FedExed giant coffee cup that would land on their desk via FedEx. And we knew exactly when it was arriving. So the SDR then would be calling within an hour of it arriving. And we saw a 40% meeting rate on that. So literally that was an evergreen piece. We dropped 20 a week. We just kept in our ABM list, kept going after it. And then with the SDR calling, we were getting a 40% meeting rate on that and converting and drove millions of dollars of revenue off that one direct mail piece. And it's expensive. That piece is probably $80, all out the door, but it paid off tremendously. So that's an example of old school direct mail. Again, I'm telling you, I've worked with digital marketers who go, what? Their heads would explode. It's not digital. We can't serve impressions, that sort of thing. And we did it more recently at Mobivity, where we were doing webinar series. Again, webinars, very common, right, in B2B SaaS marketing. And we typically would do webinars partnering with publications. So in this case, we were partnering because we at Mobivity, we were marketing our solution to restaurant brands. So, QSR chains. So we were partnering with, I'm trying to remember the publications now, restaurant magazines, a couple of restaurant-oriented magazines. And so we did a webinar series. And the first one we did, we actually were introduced to a guy named Greg Creed, who was a former CEO of Yum Brands, which is KFC, Taco Bell, et cetera. And he had a book coming out. And so we actually got a copy of the manuscript in advance, and we built the topic a little bit around the topic he was talking about and how it related back to our product. And then we had him as our guest. But what we did was we offered, if you showed up live for the webinar, because right, when you do webinars, you typically get a 20%, maybe 30% will show up for the live event. The rest you hope do an on-demand replay, but it's, if you get 100 people there, you might only get 20 that show up. So we wanted to try to get as many people as we could. So we had him an interview with him as part of that event. But we promoted, if you show up live for the event, we'll ship you a copy of his book when it publishes. We ended up having, I think it was almost close to 50% show up rate for the live event. I've never seen a webinar pull that kind of rate. But the really cool part was, I think we ended up with about 300 people that qualified for the book. We now have a high touch impact and touch with them after the webinar, because that's the other challenge. You do a webinar, maybe they show up, maybe they don't. How do you now leverage that to try to get to a sales conversation and ultimately to an opportunity? We were delivering, and I have it here somewhere, but we had a box with our own label on it. We had material about us in it and how it tied back to the book. And we shipped that book out to those 300 people, which now gave us a whole nother touch point, a follow-up email that we could follow up with the SDR now following up. Hey, I just want to make sure you got the book. And the response rate to those emails were phenomenal, because we're shipping them a $20 book, right? Or a perceived $20 book. Didn't cost us that. So the response rates that we saw on that to the SDRs were like a 40% response rate, going, oh yeah, I love the book. Thank you so much for sending it. Now I'm communicating. I've now got two-way communication going with my prospects. So now I can try to turn that into meetings. And we ultimately turned that into hundreds of thousands of dollars of business out of one webinar series.
Interesting. I mean, you mentioned there are two different routes, one being followed up with an SDR call, one being more with emails. Like, did you see a major difference, when you combine offline and online, and then adding up calls or emails on top, or what have you seen?
I'm a fan of both. And maybe that's the old world in me as well. In that, because there's a lot of people go, why bother calling? Nobody's going to answer the phone. They don't. What I have learned in that is, and by the way, I'm on my own audience of one, right? I get hit up to be sold by so many solutions, right? I'm getting hit up by MarTech solutions every day and sellers. The people that just slam me with a bunch of emails without ever trying to engage me, I will pay less attention to than the person who actually goes to the trouble to call me, text me, et cetera. I'm honest to God, I'll never take the call. No offense, but I won't take the call because I don't take calls from numbers I don't recognize, but I give them a little more credibility. And so with our own SDRs, even today at Blue Triangle, we're running a campaign right now where we've got our tier 1 targets. We don't do it with everybody, but our tier 1 targets, he's placing a call initially. The SDR is saying, hey, we've got an ebook that I want to offer you. It's about preparing for holidays. Watch your email inbox for it. I'll send you a link so you can download it. Just that extra call, we think will have, it's too early to tell, but we think will have a big impact. So to answer your question, Lucas, I'm a fan of all of the, right. It's not just email. It's not just digital display, because we'll also do digital display. The people that show up for the webinar, why not put them into an ABM targeted audience on LinkedIn? We could offer them additional content. So there's all kinds of ways you can take that audience that's now engaged with you and keep trying to engage and push them to an opportunity. And again, it's a combination of offline and digital.
Makes sense. For listeners who are interested in maybe exploring an option like this, just on a basic, very, very basic level, like which tech stack do you use in order to, for example, if we take the the info idea with the big cup, or the book, like how do you, like, what would be the 3-4 core tools that you're using to run a campaign like that?
Good question. And I will tell you, we used to do it the old school way. Some of the original pieces, our agency literally like had all the pieces printed and hand assembled. It's much easier today because there are tools. So for the book promotion, for example, we're customers of Sendoso, which is a tech sending platform that integrates with, we're Salesforce, HubSpot, integrated with those. And then we used Outreach for our sales enablement. So we would build sequences in Outreach. We had, marketing emails in HubSpot. All of it was integrated into Salesforce. And then we could, as we got the confirmation of the address to ship the book to, we could automatically ship it directly out of Sendoso. We didn't have to, and we just bought the books direct, because if you do something like books, like I've done this with our own book on a few things where somebody whose value prop is one-to-one marketing could use our book as content, because third-party content like that just pulls better than anything you produce. I know we all love our ebooks, but everybody knows it's a selling tool. Yes, it's thought leadership, but it's still a selling tool. But a true book, that book, retails for $27 on Amazon. You can buy it in bulk for a lot less. We just warehoused it all. We shipped it all to Sendoso. We had the boxes created. We had the letters created. And with Sendoso, they do handwritten notes. So we literally had handwritten, thanks for showing up for the webinar. Here's a copy of the book. We promised you, that sort of thing. So all that was super automated. It literally was one SDR handling the whole campaign.
Very cool. No, that gives us definitely a lot of insights, and the listeners as well. Maybe last question on that before we move on. In terms of the actual physical items you sent, because you mentioned it for a second, don't just go for letters, don't just go for postcards. You mentioned the book, you mentioned a very physical item. What's your thought process there in general? Like, how do you get to good ideas? Is there certain characteristics that have to be there, certain size, tangibility in order to actually make that impact? How do you think about it?
Yeah, and it's harder than it sounds, and all, to give full credit, all of these ideas, the coffee cup, the other piece, which I'll show, I know some of this on video, this piece is actually a phone. We actually shipped a live phone to people and then called them on it when they turned it on. This piece was $200.
You called them when they turn it on. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And there was a whole strategy to it. And when you work with good creative, so the agency came up with the whole concept. The key is it all has to make sense. It has to make sense for your brand. It has to make sense for your value prop. I've gotten three-dimensional items. I've gotten like coffee cups and stuff related to brands that were like ABM platforms. And it was like, it's kind of nice. You sent me something, but I get no connection whatsoever. There's not a message here that I connect with. I will not remember a year from now when I'm drinking from that coffee cup why I got the coffee cup. Yeah. The difference is when you do it well, and again, our agency is phenomenal with these kinds of things, the agency that we had. It's all very strategically thought out. So for example, this piece being the phone, it was because we were testing a whole new concept the industry had not done, a guarantee that nobody had ever offered, a guarantee for advertisers. So I went to our sales team and I said, give me the 20 people that you've been calling on for at least 6 months. They buy what we sell and you cannot get a meeting. You can't even get them to take a meeting. So it was about 250 prospects that we shipped this to. And we had this whole new concept nobody had ever done. So they used this Mission Impossible. It's like, hey, we've got something so big, we want to tell you about it. Here's a phone, your mission, turn on the phone and we'll call you. And we had one contact in the phone. I mean, it was very well thought out. We had one contact, it was the sales rep. And we had preset a text. So as soon as they turned on, a text came from the sales rep saying, hey, thanks for turning on the phone. I'll be calling you soon. And then we were able to know through technology that the phone was on, that we could then place the call within an hour of that taking place. And the concept was we wanted to get a meeting. So the goal was, if you meet with us for 30 minutes, all I'm asking is 30 minutes. I want to tell you about this new thing we're doing. Nobody has done it before. And here's the deal. You might want, these were burner phones. By the way, it's very hard to buy 250 burner phones. Like, you look like drug dealers. So we had to get all kinds of approvals. It was very hard, but it's a burner phone, right? Most people don't need a burner phone. So we said, look, the sales rep would say, if you don't need that phone, I will replace it with an iPad. If you'll just meet with me for 30 minutes, and we will take that phone and we're donating them to Ronald McDonald House, because they do need phones for the families that are, in treatment there. And so it's got a charity angle to it. They get an iPad out of the deal. And just for numbers, 250 pieces, 72 meetings out of that, $2 million in book business off one direct mail piece. Yes, it was a $100,000 direct mail piece, but the numbers said it was worth it.
Very cool. Yeah. Chuck, like we could spend hours on this. I mean, it's super interesting. I want to be respectful of your time. The show has its limits, so I want to slowly wrap it up with some rapid fire questions to close off today's episode. Are you ready for those?
Yes, I am. Good.
What is the last book that you personally read?
Let's see. I'm reading one on. I wish I terrible names, but it's on Rethink Lead Generation, I think is the name of it. You know, I tend to read business books.
What is a current outreach strategy that you personally excited about?
Current outreach. You know, we're just doing a pretty basic campaign right now, so I don't have one that I'm currently excited about, but we're planning next month for a Q4. I'm sure we will come up with something a lot more fun.
Very cool. And for the very last question, right, if today would be your first day stepping into sort of, you know, marketing and growth role, what's the one advice you would give yourself? Your first day out of formal education, what's the one advice you would give yourself?
I would say be super curious, you know, rip off every idea you can come that you see, which is basically how I built my career. I just watch what everybody else does and then borrow the idea. So that's what I'd say is be super curious and don't get closed-minded into one channel or one idea.
Very cool. Chuck, we really appreciate you joining us for the show. Thanks for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
Thank you, Lucas.